Madness. A staple of any story surrounding a lighthouse. Being isolated in the middle of a vast, unpredictable ocean could only lead to such things. That's why lighthouse workers typically worked in shifts, with regular breaks spent on shore. If anyone stayed out there too long, the sea would have no mercy on their minds, for the sea is not merciful to anyone. It's why we have lighthouses, to protect against the wrath of the sea. 7 miles north-northwest of where I stand is the Saint George Reef Lighthouse. Despite 100 years of turmoil and crashing waves, it still stands to this day. Built in 1890, its light still warns of the once notorious Dragon Reef, where the wreck of the steamer Brother Jonathan occurred in 1866, spurning the lighthouse's construction. No longer a crucial aid to navigation, the lighthouse has become a piece of living history. This place has been stewarded by the Saint George Reef Lighthouse Preservation Society since the society gained custody of it in 1996. Since I was young, I have wanted to see the lighthouse. Of course, no man would see his own madness until it is far too late, and sea madness was in my blood when I accepted the offer to visit the site. The flight out both felt like the blink of an eye and the passing of an age. I awaited sight of the tall stone tower eagerly, and once it reached my eyes, my heart twanged with anticipation. John Zimmerman, president of the Preservation Society, graciously afforded me a trip I never thought I'd get to go on, and so I utilized my time as well as I could to attune to the place. I arrived on the caisson and felt the age of the lighthouse, its surface weathered and battered from great storms far beyond any which I had stood in. The old crane the keepers used to lift cargo onto the caisson stood weary beside the tower, prepared to collapse into the briny depths after many long years of service. The wind howled around me, blowing seawater across my face and cutting through me like a cold knife. This was a constant I would become accustomed to during my time on the rock. Heat was a commodity to be hoarded, not something abundant like many of us are used to. If the outside showed the lighthouse's age, the inside exposed age's consequences. The paint had peeled from its walls as the salty air had scoured away the once friendly white painted inside. The old doors sat firm on their hinges, prepared to serve for 100 years more, but you could see the scars from its 140 years of service. The handrails were rusty, but the rust had been worn smooth by the many hands maintaining this place in its old age. The engine room has seen the worst effects of aging. The once mighty engines powering this commanding lighthouse have sputtered out and lie dormant, with parts of the even older machinery collapsed around them. Looking over the place, I could see what once was here, and that vision felt the most like what I had imagined. Spartan. Nothing in the engine room was purposeless. All things once had a function, though time has worn away the discipline this room was designed with, and its generators have grown cold. Just beyond the engine room was the old entry door from the sea, now the port from which the modern generator spews its exhaust. The doorway mesmerized me. I stood, watching the sea grow angrier from this place for a long time. No one was allowed to step out of this door, and for good reason. The old stairs down to the rock were worn and dangerous, and the sea waited hungrily for you to make one careless step into the great and cold abyss. The galley was the warmest of all the rooms in the lighthouse, since it is where the oven was, and where the people congregated. Historically, this room had always been the beating heart of the lighthouse. It was a place of camaraderie. Even though the galley's been refurbished and updated, the harsh conditions have taken their toll on the modern appliances. Age shows quickly in this lighthouse, and miles of ocean in all directions means nothing good can come for the fragile creations of man. This lighthouse felt as if it had always been here, before me, before you, before Crescent City. A monument to man, created for him to inhabit. It didn't feel made by human hands, though there was every indication of it. This is the most remote and expensive to build lighthouse on the west coast. It felt impossible that anyone could build such a structure, let alone do so with the technology of the 19th century. After a long ascent up the 100 steps to the top, I decided to look at what lit the lighthouse now. Little did I know at the time, but what I was witnessing was the relighting of the Saint George Reef Lighthouse, the first time a beacon had shone from the lighthouse in years. The old lens apparatus was removed in 1983 and, with the exception of one panel, was recovered in its entirety. It is now on display at the Delaware County Historical Society. It feels unearthly to look at the lens today. It is of the lighthouse, carries its ancient quality, and yet it feels magical. Its refracted light once guided sailors safely to harbor, and the countless souls this great device has saved from the crushing depths of the Pacific Ocean can be felt radiating from it. The current LED light is triggered by a sensor that determines when it should shine its light and is powered by lithium-ion batteries and a bank of solar panels. A far cry from the almost ritualistic human presence required to man and maintain the light in the past. After I had witnessed the lighthouse in full, the weather soured. I had no part in the decision whether or not I was to leave this rock that night. I was at the mercy of the weather. I had to prepare for the reality that I could be spending the night within the lonely tower, 7 miles away from everything I had ever known. It was maddening to watch the sea rise and swell with not so much as a brief break in the weather. This was a true rite of passage for me, to release myself of all control at the edge of the map and trust that I would return home. There are many souls who never made it back from the edge of the world that is Saint George Reef, and many have lost their minds over that edge. Though it is still kept alight by volunteers these days, it is one of the most isolated places you can visit on the west coast of California. You'd be mad to go there, and I'd recommend it. If any of this interests you as much as it did me, the Saint George Reef Preservation Society is looking for volunteers to help maintain the lighthouse. If you'd like to witness it or pay your way to keeping this edifice alive, you can find their tour schedule at https://www.stgeorgereeflight.org or call 541-254-3851. For Redwood Voice, I'm Sebastian Monroe.